But anyways, as today's speaker, I wanted to talk to you guys about I guess it's a passion of mine, and that is the benefits of houseplants and some tips and basic um, taking care of houseplants, what plants you might want to get, where's a good spot to put them if you're considering getting a little greenery in your house, what you may need to know ahead of time, and so forth. This really is something that I didn't realize I was passionate about until like over the years. I have discovered that I really enjoy coming home to plants or waking up in the morning and like I'm constantly pruning them, pulling off dead leaves and just like taking care of these plants. And I think this all really started. So I was fortunate enough to grow up on an organic dairy farm back in southeastern Wisconsin. And we were a grass farm. So it was all dairy and it was grass-fed cows, grass-fed milk, and we farmed for Organic Valley. My dad is one of the original members of the Organic Valley Co-op. And yeah, we farmed organically. My dad now has an autoimmune and he sold the farm 2.5 years ago. So it was in the family up until 2.5 years ago and was a really cool way to be brought up. I had acreage to run around on. Was around animals. We had horses, we had pigs, we had chickens. And then my mom had a massive garden. And we were one of those families, alternative, that kind of didn't go to the grocery store all that often. And my mom was able to like can and freeze most things out of her garden that would get us through a lot of the winter. And so she was, pickling things. She was just freezing things, other things she was canning. But so she had this garden and then she had these amazing house plants and she had this fig tree behind their bed in their bedroom that I think is the first plant I like fell in love with. And it was this massive fig tree with they're called these fiddle leaf figs and they've got these huge leaves. They get as tall as really your space will allow them to. And there was one time where that tree got these little fungus gnats, and my mom, you would always like take in other people's house plants when they were getting rid of them. And I guess these little fungus gnats, they're these little like flies, came in on a plant that she adopted and they attacked this fig tree. So my first memory of like really getting into house plants is me and my dad having this chore of taking out this fig tree. We had to like repot it and then put sand over it because the flies would like dig through the soil, lay their larvae in the soil, and then you get all these like, once the larva hatched, you get all these like flies, these little fungus gnats flying around. So that was my first hands-on like, all right, we got to solve this fungus gnat problem. Taking this fig tree outside, repotting it. We're going to put a fine layer of sand, fresh dirt, keep that root ball all together, put it in a little bit of a bigger pot so it can continue to grow. And then we put a layer of about an inch of sand over the soil so these flies could no longer burrow into the soil. The sand was too heavy. They couldn't get through it. And that was my first memory of really like taking care of a plant and realizing like, oh, it's got an ailment. We got to fix this plant. What are we going to do with it? And I think that point forward, I was always the guy like in college schlepping plants from house to house, from one apartment to the other. And like, we always had plants, and it was kind of, like, I don't remember any other college or very few, I guess maybe later, like senior year in college, some of our friends started getting these house plants as well. But I was always kind of known as like, oh, wow, you guys have some plants in here. Cool. Who takes care of those? And I just enjoyed doing it. So house plants, you're thinking about getting some in your house. Are there benefits to having house plants? You got to remember, like, these plants that are inside in a container, it's not natural for a plant to live indoors out of the sunlight in a confined pot, right? So they're basically relying on us or you for all their necessities. Artificial environment requires you to take care of its life, essentially. So there's a few things that you got to remember when you're bringing houseplants in. And I'm going to break this down into like 4, maybe 5 basic categories. Number 1 is temperature. Most plants, and there are some exceptions, but will survive in any temperature range between about 55 to 75 degrees. I'd say 60 to 70 is like that 10-degree temperature window. That's the hot spot for houseplants. Light is another big thing. So you got temperature, you got light. If you live in a place that is a basement apartment with one window that like gets a little bit of sun coming in for an hour of the day, you might not be in a great place for houseplants, but you really want some. There are still ways of getting houseplants in, and you could research, low light houseplants. Typically, if you don't want to put in the research and you're just like looking around a store for plants with the darkest leaves can withstand the most darkness. So any plants that have really light, kind of almost lime green like leaves, need a lot of sunlight.
Like aloe vera?
Like aloe vera, yep. The darker the leaf, the more shade or darkness it can withstand. The other thing, so we have temperature, light. The other thing is water. Watering your plant is very important. A lot of people overwater or underwater, and it can be really tough to know if you're overwatering or underwatering. A lot of plant ailments that you see, they show similar signs due to overwatering as well as due to underwatering. And a lot of people who like taking care of their plants, and I would say I fall in this category, I sometimes catch myself overwatering plants. So I'm going to go over some different tips on different watering methods, way you can avoid overwatering. And really underwatering, I would say, is probably just neglect, not checking in on them enough. So you do want to grab your plants and like some people just set their plant in one spot in a windowsill and it stays there forever. I like to move them around, grab them off the windowsill, clean up any dead leaves on them, and, check in on them. And one way that I will check to see if a plant needs, and I'm going to just grab a plant quick, see if a plant needs any sort of water, is you want to like go in the top of your plant and stick your finger in up to about your knuckle. And if it's moist at all, it does not need watering. If it's basically dry the whole way up to your knuckle, you're going to need to water that plant. And I'm going to go over a couple different watering techniques. And then another major thing, so we have temperature, we have light, we have water. Another thing is the type of pot that you're putting your plant in. So a very common one are going to be these clay pots, I would say, or a ceramic. The clay is interesting in the fact that, like, this is something I never really considered early on. It actually absorbs a lot of the water and holds it within the clay and releases it over time. So clay pots, you actually don't need to water quite as much because the pot itself absorbs water, and then the plant is able to soak it up like that week after you actually watered it. The biggest tip I would say is you'll notice on the bottom of all my pots, there is a hole. So a lot of people, they put their plants in a type of carrier, in a type of pot that is completely enclosed on the bottom. And yeah, Hannah's grabbing an example of one of those. Something like this. This is a little clay piece I made, and it doesn't have any holes. So if I were better at ceramics, I would have liked to work in some holes to it. But the other thing is what I have done with a lot of containers where, these ones really look cool, I think, but they don't allow for proper drainage. So what I have planted, you can see this is kind of like a sad looking cactus that I stole from my mother. She had this beautiful, huge cactus plant, and I took a little shoot that was coming off, and I'm trying to see if it'll take. I try to reserve these containers without holes in them for any sort of plants like cactuses or succulents that you're not watering very often. And I'll go over how I do that. So a lot of people think if you have a succulent, it only needs like a little drip of water here and there. Like they don't need it, they grow in the desert. They don't need a lot of water. What you actually want to do is water it really thoroughly, like once or twice a month in the summertime. And then some of these succulents can go the whole winter without watering. Others, like the ones that we have, I will maybe water twice throughout the whole winter, probably 2 months apart. And in a container like that, I will, I'll water it thoroughly. So you're top watering this pretty heavily, and I'll let it sit for about 10 minutes. But then I'm going over the sink and I'm dumping off any excess water after it lets, that soil soaks it up for about 10 minutes. Then I'm dumping off any excess water, because you don't want that water, the soil, to be so saturated that these roots are actually sitting in water. You can easily get what's called a root rot. and that causes a lot of ailments in plants. So yeah, we've got containers, and that's kind of, so yeah, I guess it was, let's see, temperature, light, water, type of pot. Temperature, light, water, type of pot. Yeah, 4 different things. I'm gonna backtrack a little bit here. So back to temperature. A lot of times when you are putting a house plant in your house, you're just putting it in areas where it has light. And you got to watch what's underneath. Like, one of our windowsills in our bedroom that is a western facing window, really great for plants, is right under or right above our radiator. So it's constantly, all the heat is rising right up above these plants. So those plants that I have over there, and I mainly use spider plants in there because they're pretty resilient, they need to be watered a lot more than our other house plants, just because they're getting dried out. So humidity has a lot to do with proper care of house plants and how they're doing. A lot of times in the winter, it's not as humid. In the summer, it's a little more humid, but we live in a pretty dry climate. So you do need to pay attention to these, and they can, especially now as the days are getting longer, the sun's getting a little stronger. You'll notice these plants drying up very quickly, and they need a little bit more watering as we jump into spring here. And then obviously in the summer, you need to water them quite a bit more. As far as which windows are best to put plants in, your best window is going to be anything south facing, followed by west facing and east facing. North facing is where you want to put low light plants or avoid putting plants. They get the least amount of sunlight, especially in the winter months. And in my experience, any north facing windows, they just don't do that great altogether. So, you know, if you're in your house, I feel like a lot of people, that's a starting point. They don't realize which way their windows are facing. So, you know, basically towards Grand Teton National Park is north, and you can usually get your bearings off of that. Southern windows are the best, followed by western and then eastern windows as far as sunlight goes. In general, any plants that you have that are blooming plant or fruiting plant are going to need a lot more light than plants that don't create a flower or don't fruit. So because they're putting all that energy into creating a flower or fruit, they need a lot more light. It takes a lot more photosynthesis to actually do that. So that's another idea of, all right, this is, you know, you're at a plant shop. Ooh, this has a beautiful flower on it. I want to put it in this corner of the house. Might not be a good idea. It needs a lot of light if you're wanting that to flower again. Watering. So this is something that I have changed my technique on over the years. I always used to what's called top watering. You know, just taking your water pitcher and watering the top of this. I think that there's a better way of actually watering your plants if you don't know or aren't sure, especially, you know, off the bat when you have a new plant, you're not sure how much water it's going to consume, what's right for it, because it kind of takes some time just feeling them out and playing with them and noticing, all right, yep, that dried out pretty quick, or this plant does not need a lot of water, the soil stays pretty moist, is bottom watering. And I'm going to show you guys how to do that here, or a way that I do it. So I just take any standard bowl, and I'm going to grab a bowl quick here and just fill it with water. So you just want to make sure that the pot that you have can fit inside the bowl. So I just grabbed a bowl here that I made, and I filled it about halfway with water. You then take your plant that you want to water, and instead of dumping this water in the top here, like most people would water a plant, you actually just set this inside your bowl of water, let it sit for about 10-15 minutes, come back, and you will notice that almost all of the water has left the bowl, and it's actually being soaked up by the soil and the roots of the plant. And if you come back in about 15 minutes, and we can leave this sit here for 15 minutes, although it's not going to be a great example because I watered these like 2 days ago, you will actually be able to feel moisture on the top of the soil. So that's a really great way of ensuring that you're not overwatering or underwatering. It's kind of up to the plant and the soil to take in as much moisture as it would like. The only thing is you're not going to want to keep it sitting in this. You're going to want to remove it from that. And then I always have all my pots on a type of saucer. So So like this one, some sort of plate, some sort of small thing that it can allow any drainage to go into, and it's not leaving water rings on your windowsills or ruining your paint or anything else along those lines. So bottom watering, really great way of going about it. If you're gonna top water, I highly recommend never doing it in something that doesn't have a hole on the bottom, because when you're watering, the most important thing you're waiting for is to see the water coming out of the bottom. So I always, if I'm top watering, it's always sitting in something like this. You're adding the water to your plant, waiting for water to come into the bottom of your container. You do want to see sometimes like 30% of the water come through the plant. And then you don't want to just leave your container sit, or your water catcher, or your little plate or whatever you're using. You don't want to just leave it sitting there full of water. So you top water, you let it run through, and then about 10 minutes later, you're going to want to come back, take this, bring it to the sink, dump it out, and get rid of that excess water. Because otherwise, that it's, also bottom watering itself, and it's going to be way too much moisture for that plant. So yeah, bottom watering, not a way a lot of people water their plants, but a really effective way. And I find that it works really well. So as far as these containers go, I know Hannah and I have run into this issue where especially Hannah was like, well, Tony, the solid containers without the holes in them, they always are so much more beautiful. Like, why don't they make cool ones like these that aren't just this clay? So what I'd recommend, that we've got an example of that here. So Hannah wanted to always we've got this cool pottery pot thing that Hannah always wanted to plant in. And I was like, well, it's not going to drain well, da-da-da-da-da. So what we ended up doing, and this is very easy to do with any of those, is you can take this ugly clay pot, and that's got a hole in the bottom. And then you can utilize this as your catch. And if you find just the right size, they go right in there, and you don't even notice that it's not the original container, but it's still able to drain within this, and you're not having your issues. One thing I will recommend though, like always, you want to, and I'm just noticing as I took this out, I've got some water from the last time I watered this sitting in the bottom here. And that's something I didn't pay close enough attention and empty out. You always want to get rid of that water. That is where pests will start to breed and lay their eggs and so forth. If you have stagnant water sitting in something and it's not able to go anywhere, not able to evaporate, or, like something like this that's sitting right on the bottom of the container, it can continue soaking up. But when it's in this bigger one, it kind of hovers in here, and it allows airspace and space for that water to just sit and become stagnant. And that can lead to pests or just nasty smelling water, kind of a funky situation. So that's one hack we've discovered for still utilizing these cool but solid containers without holes in them, and making it a little bit more visually pleasing, I guess. And if another way of going about this, and Brian, you may be able to speak a little bit more to this. I don't know what type of bit you need to drill a hole through ceramics without it just splitting on you or just crumbling to pieces. Maybe there is something you can utilize. I've only done it with plastic containers, and that works really well, but I've never been brave enough to drill through ceramic.
You probably need a bit on a pot you don't care about.
Yeah.
That doesn't make it. No, there are ceramic bits that people use to drill through tile. So you could try. I've never done it, so I don't know how it would work, but that might be an option. But yeah, I would try it on a pot you don't have an emotional attachment to.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So yeah, always recommend having a pot with holes in it. Maybe we can try that at some point, drilling through some of our ceramics here. And then if you do have some that you really like that don't have holes in them, that's a great thing to reserve for something like succulents or a cactus or some of these really low maintenance plants that don't require a lot of watering. Because you're only watering them once a month in the summer, maybe. You can easily dump the rest of that water off. You're not repeatedly putting water in there and running into possibly damaging those roots. So another thing that a lot of people, at least to my knowledge, don't do is take their plants outside or shower their plants. You'll go into some people's houses, and I notice this especially with elderly people, and you'll see like their plants hanging in their corner. You'll see their leaves have like a dust film on them or are just like so dirty. And that actually prevents photosynthesis. So you need as much of this leaf surface area to the light and clean as possible to have a healthy, thriving plant. So what I will do, probably more than most folks do, is I'll actually take all our plant babies, and I don't know if we're up to a recent count in here. We've got a lot of them right now. So it's a little bit of a chore. But I'll take them all individually into the shower and actually like shower them off. So you're like, because it is good. I mean, you got to remember, these come from nature, right? So outside, the plant is being rained on, and it's actually absorbing a lot of the moisture through its leaves. It's also continuously getting a cleaning from any new rainfall. And you kind of are trying to mimic nature indoors, right? And a lot of these are coming from like Africa or the rainforest or these areas that are receiving a lot of moisture, and it's falling from the sky and they're getting wet. So it's super important to shower your plants. We have a short window here in Jackson for it, but summertime, middle of the day after that shower, you don't want to bring them outside into the direct sunlight while there's still moisture droplets on your leaves, because the sun can be so intense, it can actually burn through. It causes like this, it hits the water and it causes the water to heat up so much they'll actually burn through your leaves, and you can damage your plants pretty severely that way. But once they've dried, bringing them outside and getting them a dose of that sunlight that they may not get in that corner of your house, I find to go a long way with a lot of different houseplants here as well. So why have houseplants inside anyways? What are there any benefits to houseplants? And a lot of these studies that I believe, of course, there are benefits to them. There's a lot of benefits to houseplants, but I started in preparing for this a little bit, trying to look up and let me know if you guys have any questions at any point. Any research that actually went into these houseplants and like benefits of having plants indoors and what it can do for the psyche, what it can do for yourself. A lot of the studies I found where they had actually done real studies on this were coming out of like Sweden and Norway and some of these more progressive countries, I would say. But there is proof that houseplants improve mental health. And a lot of people say that when they're out in nature, they feel happier, right? And I believe that being around these living plants, these life forces, is, in a way, bringing nature inside and allowing nature to be indoors. It brings a sense of peace, I find. It gives me something to take care of every morning. You're checking on them. It's like, I get up and I'm doing the rounds, or I come home from work and I'm doing the rounds and I'm checking on these plants. And I take a sense of pride in it, and it brings me definitely quite a bit of joy. One of the big things that you'll find when you look up benefits of houseplants is that they're like air filters indoor. They improve your air quality inside. And we all know that plants take up carbon dioxide and release oxygen, right? And a lot of people think the reason people have stated that, they'll do these like productivity tests where they're in a room without plants and then they go into a room that has house plants in them and the productivity spikes. And a large theory behind that is that it's actually the more oxygen in the air due to the house plants. Your brain does better on more oxygen, and that is part of the reason that productivity and overall creativity is spiking in these little offices or cubicles that they've done these studies in with plants versus not having any plants in.
Tony, do you know the difference or like how air purifiers work? Like I know we got a little like Mister thing here at our house. Is that like in the same realm? Or is that accomplishing a different end goal? Like where does that fall within that space?
Your Mister, like, actually cleaning the air, or is it adding like humidity to the air?
It's essential oil diffuser.
Okay, ours is ours is a little different.
They do have the
Yeah.
humidifiers.
Yeah, the humidifiers, or like, I mean, don't they have air purifiers?
And they have air
Yeah.
purifiers,
Yeah.
General, maybe not at our house.
I mean, it's accomplishing the same thing. I know that just because like Simply Health, we're like really big into air purifiers and we sell really high quality ones, and that's using like an ozone technology basically to create cleaner oxygen.
Hmm.
So it's basically doing the same thing, but probably on like a more like machine level versus like a nature level.
Yeah.
And I would say, Will,
Just a heads up, we have 9 minutes before we'll have to reboot.
okay. I was gonna say, if you had like one plant in your house or your apartment, and then you had a like air filter, you're probably not gonna get much of a result from that one plant. But if you had like 12 and one air filter, it might be doing the equivalent to that air filter. But I haven't looked at any exact studies.
Yeah, I was just curious.
What about if Will has one plant, but he chugs a bottle of essential oils?
Depends on what she's.
All right. I'm sorry, I didn't know what I had in my house. I've already been scolded once, Brian.
So yeah, a lot of people also along those lines, air filters, dehumidifiers. Like I know growing up, we had a dehumidifier in our basement where you'd have to like every now and then take the back off and empty the water out. And then you have humidifiers as well. And plants actually add humidity to the air. And a lot of people will say that it improves, especially out here in our dry climate, it improves like dry skin, colds, sore throats. And there have been these studies, like I said, mainly out of Sweden, that have proven this. Another benefit to having houseplants, and something that, especially for folks living in the city, is that there have been a lot of studies that houseplants absorb a substantial amount of noise. So background noise from like streets, or putting them, you know, if you have one wall facing a busy street or something, putting a bunch of plants there will actually absorb a lot of the noise, and it is substantially quieter if you have houseplants versus not having houseplants. So yeah, there's all sorts of, you know, they bring a sense of peace. They give you something to like get out of bed for, and like, all right, yep, got to take care of the plant babies today. But there are a lot of benefits to having these plants around. And I would say the number one thing comes from improving air quality, putting more oxygen into the air. And they add a lot of beauty, I think, too. So, you know, you'll walk into a space that doesn't have plants versus a space that does. Like I noticed this at like dentist offices or doctors' waiting rooms, or, you know, these places that are not super exciting to go into. But the ones that decorate it right, or have a little bit of greenery in there, or have a plant in the corner, it adds quite a bit. It's almost like a nice welcome walking into that. So yeah, I find that the benefits of houseplants are numerous. It does a lot for my psyche as an individual. Hannah, do you find any benefits to houseplants?
Nah, I hate them.
No. It's all, I guess that's why I take care of the indoor plants. But yeah, any questions along those lines, or anything that you've been like, dang, maybe I've been doing this wrong. Maybe I'm not taking great care of it, or, you know, it's for me, it's not something that I have any sort of like formal training in. I really just watch my mom take care of her plants, and then have been experimenting on my own ever since I've lived alone. And I think my first few plants came from my mother, and she was like, hey, Tony, you got to bring these into your space and green it up a little bit. And it's grown from there.
That's Tony. Actually, one of the things I had jotted down is how you mentioned in college, like as you get closer to senior year, it becomes almost like fashionable and cool to have plants, right? Like, oh, cool, like you've got all these cool succulents around, mainly because you can't take care of them as a college kid. But that, like, it's silly. It seems silly to me that it takes so long for people, or like society in general, to have plants become a normal thing in the house. right? Like, why don't we give kids a plant when they're young to take care of, and like have that be a process? Because give them a puppy, and the parents would take care of it, right? But that having a plant that you get to care for, and you learn, all the things you just talked about, how important they are. Like, everybody understands that, but you kind of get that knowledge at a certain point in life. It seems odd to me that's not earlier.
I agree. It's kind of funny too. It's like it's almost like a test before you get a dog or something. Like, all right, can I take care of a plant and not kill it? Then maybe I can get a puppy, and then maybe I'm responsible enough for a kid or something along those lines. Your first stepping stone. But yeah, that is interesting. And I think that maybe Brian can speak to this as well. In the Waldorf education, we had a huge garden at our Waldorf school, and we were pretty hands-on from kindergarten on. And then there was like every grade that you moved up into, you had to take care of a different section of the garden. But even there, it was like the 8th graders were taking care of like the cauliflower and the broccoli heads and like the stuff that was more important. And we were more so taking care of like the wildflowers in kindergarten and the stuff that was like wasn't going to reap a crop, and it didn't matter how well you did at it. So that is interesting. You really don't do that. And like a lot of people I think are like, I can't take care of a live thing. Like I don't have time or any, but I mean, do I spend a lot of time with these plants? Mm-hmm. I guess I do. I was going to bring up the argument it doesn't require a lot of time, but maybe because I enjoy it, I am spending a lot more time than.
But I mean, you also have like a full house full of them, right?
That's true.
To have 1 or 2 around the house makes it manageable. I mean, we probably have about 10 in here, if I had to guess.
Yeah.
And MJ runs point on it for sure. And it takes up a decent amount of time. I think we overwater them because it's like a once a week that
We
we
have
check.
it scheduled. Well, this would be a question if you're open to answering a question.
Very open.
So most of what we have in our house are succulents. And I have a watering schedule where every other week I water the succulent.
How are they doing?
Tony, remind us again what you were saying was your pacing for that.
Yeah, so with succulents, this is something that I was always under the impression like, oh, it's a succulent. It needs very little water. Like I'm just giving it a little drip, once a week or every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I have now learned that so you're trying to mimic like where this plant is at in nature. And a lot of these succulents thrive in the desert, right? And you'll have like this like flash flood occasionally where it just gets pounded with water. So you're watering it really, really thoroughly, but only like once or twice a month. And even once a month in the wintertime may be way too much. Like we go some of our succulents in the winter, we will let them go probably 3-4 months without watering them at all.
Yeah. See, I hardly water them, but I do water them every other week. So.
Yeah. So I would actually recommend watering them really thoroughly, like every month or every other month.
Got it.
And then letting it dry out completely. If they're in a spot that's not getting a lot of sun, that might even be too much watering.
Yeah.
But yeah, you want to mimic that like flash flood situation. Water it really, really thoroughly. Let it sit for 10 minutes. And then most succulents are in a closed container so they don't have holes on the bottom. Yeah. And then come back after 10 minutes, maybe hold your hand over some of the soil and just tilt it out over the sink so excess water can leave the pot.
Cool.
Well,
yeah,
and then
go ahead.
With that, like this guy, we obviously need to repot it. But like, how can you repot, or do you some of, where is this right? Like these are new.
Mm-hmm.
Would you just say repot the entire thing, or is there a way that you can take sections of it?
So as far as you were talking about like propagating off of that succulent?
Yeah, if that would be the best way to go about it, other than just repotting the whole thing.
Yeah, I would recommend repotting the whole thing just because I don't know what type of succulent that is, and they're all a little bit different. Like I've seen before where people actually take like one of the little leaves, like not a whole like
one of these,
a leaf, and then wrap it in like a moist paper towel and let it sit for a while, and then actually plant that when it starts growing little roots. I also know some succulents you can like nip just one of the branches and put that in like a jar of water and let it sit in a sunny spot. usually you have to do this type of propagating in the summertime when it's getting a lot of sunlight.
Yeah.
And like white, stringy, like bean sprout looking roots that will start to come, and then you can plant that. But every succulent's a little bit different. And in my experience, like repotting or trying to propagate, like taking the little growth, sometimes you'll get this little growth right at the base that'll start coming up, and you can take that up and like actually separate it from the root ball and then plant it in its own pot. The succulents are just, they're tough.
Yeah, and they're stretching. That's called stretching.
Yeah, you're getting a lot of stretch out of yours there.
Which I don't remember. Why does that cause?
Is that this part right here, Tony?
Or this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an ailment due to overwatering, actually.
I'm sorry, which part of the stretching? Like this bottom half or the top half?
Like if you were to let go, MJ, it's just kind of like flopping there, right? Yeah, you got like this like really stretchy, and we have one like that too that's going on, and it's from overwatering. It's like they start to
okay.
like get really just windy, and then like you can't even see what's and I've got this cactus here that I'm not very good. You can just see the top of this cactus right here. And it's like this top part has gotten very elongated, and is just like, you can see kind of where it started to just like stretch up and like, just like reaching for something. And that's actually due to overwatering.
Oh, okay. A lot. So yeah, all of our succulents are doing that right now. So definitely overwatering them.
Yeah. So you're not checking, like with the succulents we have here, they're like all doing that stretching thing. But like the bottom, or like the soil is super dry. You're cool with that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool.
And you want it to be pretty dry, and you're going to use a different type. Like if you're buying potting soil, it's a different type of soil for succulents. They have like a special cactus succulent soil that's a lot more coarse, and it has like rocks in it and stuff. Then it's kind of mimicking the desert in comparison to like a good organic, rich potting soil.
So I was curious with repotting. I've never really thought about repotting drawing a blank on the name. The arid plant, succulent. Thank you. But then with other house plants, like how often do you repot them? And when you repot them, do you add different nutrients? Just because, like, I always when I'm pruning plants, if there's leaves that are on the dying days, I snip them off, but then just leave them in the pot just in case they decompose and help to add nutrients, just because you were saying like trying to mimic nature. Yeah,
I'm pretty particular about continuously like cleaning up those dead plants or leaves or whatever is dropping, and I don't leave them in the pot. And I haven't experimented with adding any sort of fertilizers or any sort of nutrients after putting that original potting soil in. But I always do get like a pretty high grade organic potting soil that I feel like you get that starting point, and it's always worked for me. I've never had to add anything on. But repotting is something that I'm going to grab a plant that I know we have that needs to be repotted really badly. And I'm going to see if I can show you what I want you to see. 1 second.
Will, I love your charades of what your plant's doing.
Yeah, it's a lot of our plants that have a certain limpness to them.
So this is another spider plant that's in this, like, you can see it's a fairly small container, and it's just like, some angles you can hardly see the container, like it's ready to be in a bigger pot. I was hoping, this has this weird bottom to it where like that tray is like attached to it. But one way of knowing a tall tale sign that your plants need to be repotted, I'm just trying to figure out how to get this off because I know it does come off. Yeah. Oh, this has got something under it. You can't see it really well from where you guys are, but if you look up into this, the roots of this plant are just like in a snake ball trying to get out the hole and are like complete. If you were to take this out right now and like kind of squeeze the sides of the pot and pull the whole root ball out, at the very bottom, it would just be all wound up, has nowhere to go. and the roots start like kind of poking through the holes on the bottom. So that's one of the things. If I'm at like a nursery buying a new houseplant, that's like basically you want to look at the overall health of the plant, but then I'm always checking the bottom to see if those roots are poking out, and if they are, and I really am connected to that plant, like that plant's going to need to do some regrowing. I usually try not to buy plants like that, but you can ask those nurseries to like repot it for you or put it in a bigger pot before you leave with it. It's just going to take some extra care then because it's reestablishing itself. So the most important thing that you're going to want to do is you want to keep the root ball, unless you're trying to like this one here, you could actually see has like two separate, if I separate them out here, like it's almost like two, it's almost like two separate plants. It's all going to be one root ball because it's in such a small container, and you want to ideally keep that intact. But if you see something like this, that is one that you could delicately try to separate that root ball of these two different stems and then have two different plants that you could plant. But ideally, when you are replotting any houseplant, if you're not trying to separate them and make more plants, you want to keep that root ball completely intact. And then
Tony, so you're saying you want to keep it intact? Like there's, to me, I would look at that and say, oh, you just cut down the middle and suddenly you've got two separate plants, or is that just like screwing everything up?
Yeah, that's gonna hurt your plant quite a bit. That's like your plant going downhill on a bike at 40 miles an hour and hitting the pavement. It's just
Tony, you just saved some plants' lives in their household.
Yeah, you want to delicately like pull it apart, like not rip it apart. Like you're ideally not breaking anything. You're just untangling it so it's still in its original. But say this was just one plant. Take out the whole root ball, keep it intact, put it in your new pot. Usually with that new pot, your drainage hole, you're going to need to put like a rock or something over it so your dirt isn't just coming right back out. And then you want to position your root ball in there just right so that there's about the top of your plant starts about an inch into your container. And then you want to fill the sides of it with dirt. And then the most important thing, and a lot of times I'll go and I'll like water friends' plants or something, and you start to water it. And what you want to see is the water pooling up inside the whole pot. Sometimes you'll just find this one spot where it seems like all the water is just going straight down and it's going straight to the bottom of the pot. And you'll notice that the rest of the top of the plant didn't get any moisture to it. And that's because when they repotted it, they didn't compact the soil at all. And there's like these air holes or these areas on one side of the plant that it didn't fill in at all, but it looks like it did. So you really got to like kind of bang it around, compact that, add more into the, or more soil into the sides of your pot. You want to compress it till it's pretty firm and then give it a thorough watering, and then you've repotted. Then you're good to go on your regular cycles. So this one is going to be coming up for repotting really soon just because it's outgrowing it. It's not like you need to ever repot your plants, but if you want them to get bigger and really thrive, they need to be in a pot that can support their root system. You know, when you think about like these plants outside in the garden, they're not constrained to anything. So they're able to like creep out as far as they want to. Whereas here, they're all constrained to just what the vessel you're putting them in. So the bigger they're going to grow, all depends on the size of your pot. Do you guys have any questions for me? That kind of goes over the basics of Tony's amateur plant shop.
Tony's pro moves.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I was like, I've needed to listen to this information for years. I just haven't.
All our plants are like, thank you, Tony.
Ryan's plant voice.
It's a creepy plant. I really had not thought about all those different water, like the bottom down water technique before. And one thing that I had as a question after you said you don't want to leave it with that drip tray having water in it is because I've always thought that if you have a drip tray, it's good to have water in it to just add some humidity around the plant. But I guess what you're saying makes more sense of not, because that overwaters it. So is it good to have a tray underneath that has water for humidity, but it's not necessarily like the pot's not submerged into that, or is that extra humidity not really useful?
The extra humidity is not really useful in the tray. You don't ever want to see, like, if you watered your plants 3 days ago and there's still water sitting in those trays underneath the plant, you don't want to really see that. That's an area. And Hannah and I, we brought some plants in that we were plant sitting for a friend of Hannah's, and we got these. They came in with these fungus gnats, and that is what they say, everything that you read about online. And they're like these little flies that I started noticing around the house. And I was like, where are they coming from? And Hannah noticed them like hovering around the edges of this one plant that we had brought in to take care of. And they say that they breed like in anything like this that ever has water sitting or moisture sitting in it. So really the tray is just there, Brian, for if you are top watering, putting water in the top, allowing that 30% to drain out. Then 10 minutes later, you want to take this, dump that excess water out, and have it be pretty much completely dry. Then if you are bottom watering, I would take this off, put this into my bowl of water, let it sit there for 10, 15 minutes, come back, take it out of the water, put it back in its tray in case anything drips further. And then if there's quite a bit drippage, I would even empty that a few minutes later just to ensure that there is no water sitting there.
Cool.
Tony, have you thought about? Go ahead, Brian.
I was also curious with moving plants around a house, just in nature, they're not moving around. So does that kind of mess with them as far as just them being used to a certain, aspect of life from like north, south, east, west? And
it does. Yeah, it absolutely does. And some of my mom's friends will have like, they really want a specific plant in that corner of their house, but it doesn't get a lot of light. So they'll buy 2 of those plants and they'll put one here in more light and one in that darker corner. And then every 2 weeks, they're like rotating them. So they can still have a plant in that darker corner where it looks visually pleasing and there's that space you always want to plant, but you're rotating it so it is getting 2 weeks of better sunlight and is able to thrive and photosynthesize the way it wants to, and then it's kind of going dormant for 2 weeks in that corner, and you're rotating them that way. So I think if you were to just move one plant around a little bit, you'll definitely notice if you keep it in that area long enough. 2 weeks, 3 weeks is long enough where you notice how that plant is starting to do or not do.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we more so move them around as and correct me if I'm wrong, to try to find the best spot for them. It's more of we've had this here for a year, is there a better place? It's not thriving so much. Can we swap these two and are they both going to do better in that situation? And then also I think you mean rotating them too,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. The main reason that Hannah and I rotate is because we don't have any southern facing windows, and our western windows where we get our best light is right above our radiator. So I'm trying to constantly figure out what plant, because they all dry out so much and some do terribly there. Some seem to like that heat. So I'm trying to figure out which ones do okay there, because none love the spot, but it gets the best light. So it's kind of this where's the happy medium?
Yeah.
Tony, where do I get my first houseplant?
Oh! So the spider plants like this, and this one doesn't have any on it right now, but they will let these little and they look like spiders and they propagate, and you can pull those off, put them in water, and you can allow them to sit in water, in a thing of water for 2 weeks. They'll grow roots, and you could have your very own plant. So Sam, I would love to gift you your very first plant if you were looking for
Sam has a whole army of spider plants upstairs right now, actually.
I'll have to look for a baby.
Brian's got one. You see that?
There it is.
Spider.
Oh,
You
shoot.
can actually just pull that thing right off, put that whole thing in a little bit of water, and it's, especially in the summertime, it's amazing how quick those roots grow. Plant it in your little planter, and before you know it, you'll have something like this.
It's so crazy. You're talking about the productivity components and how all the different benefits. It's a bummer then to see that you go to a doctor's office and they have a fake plant, right?
Yeah.
Because who's caring for it? Is that something that you have considered as like a possibility that like you offer up those expertise of, you go into, like Sam works at Luxury Properties. Sam, you've floor to ceiling glass windows, right?
Mhm.
So it's pretty awesome when it comes to lighting and everything. But go to them and say, hey, here's like, let me work with your plans to help them thrive, because that's something that I know. I mean, like Giver, for example, at our shop, we don't have any plants because like, who's going to take care of it?
Yeah.
But it would be awesome for us because our air is so bad there that having it would be incredible. But yeah, we have pretty minimal light too.
The other thing I was gonna say about the minimal light thing is like, they make these really awesome grow boxes now with grow lights that you can literally grow any plant in like a dark room without windows.
Yeah.
They're really cool, and like, yeah, they can really help a dark office space without windows.
Yeah. I don't have any experience using those. I don't like the fluorescent lights that a lot of those glow lights utilize, but I know they make some high quality like LED nice ones now that are supposed to be really awesome.
Oh, interesting.
Curious about your mom.
So Kelsey will attest to
My
this.
mom works for an organic LED, or she used to as of last week. But I'll have to ask her about that if they've been experimenting with that at all, because the lights are like really beautiful, really thin. But yeah, that's a good question.
I love it. Will, whatever info you find from that, I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. I mean, literally started a new job earlier this week.
Monday.
On Monday, yeah. So, it'd be fun to hear her reflect on that all that.
Yeah, that's cool.
Tony, I have a question.
Yeah.
That, is just kind of in accord with all of this, but kind of separate. With plants, like we have a bamboo plant in the back that like bamboo has like historically been given, like when you're starting something new, that people put it in like their new office or new home. Then I know like in Hawaii and Kauai, like orchids are a symbol of like really good luck and prosperity. And I'm just curious if like you love certain plants because of what they symbolize, if you even follow what they symbolize or care what they symbolize, or if there's like a field of that people are really into. I really like plants too, but I generally tend to gravitate towards the plants that I've either been around a lot, or I've heard or traveled to places where they love those types of plants.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with the orchids, it's funny you say that because my aunt she's on that train, and she like has this window sill that has just orchids, and they all bloom at these different times, and it's really cool. They're an interesting plant to take care of. I don't so much gravitate towards a certain type of plant because of its meaning. I would say that would be more Hannah over here. I like having different varieties of plants and I'm still in that phase where it's like very experimental, and coming out here to Wyoming where we do have like limited light, especially in the winter, all these plants, it was a bit of a transition period to like figure out how they could thrive here. They all do really well in my cabin in the summertime, but it seems like winter is kind of like this like struggle to just like make it through until it's summer again. I do know that like
us
that stuff have this like kind of like crazy following where there are people who are just obsessed with their bonsai trees and they're constantly trimming it and so forth. Shamrocks, yeah, they're these ones that will like open every day and then close every night.
Is that the one that's in the base of your tree?
Yeah.
And then like actually native to Wisconsin are Venus flytraps. There are areas in Wisconsin and that's that plant that will like close on insects. And I know those are great house plants. They're a little harder to take care of. I think because you do need some insects flying around that they can actually be.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't so much gravitate towards like the symbolism of the plants or put them in for a certain meaning. I think it's just the overall benefits that any green plant's gonna have in the house.
Completely. Yeah.
Tony, when you said bonsai tree, it reminded me, there's a NPR article I was listening to a while ago, and they were talking about there was a famous like greenhouse in London, maybe, I don't know, somewhere in Europe, I think. And it's not the first time this has happened, but a group of people broke in at night and stole these bonsai trees that had been like growing for 50 plus years there.
Yeah.
But so it was like, holy, yeah, like
Thanks.
are obsessed with them.
You'll hear of
Travel with
these.
them.
They travel with them. They take them on their vacations with them because they can't leave them. And you'll hear about these like heirloom items that are passed down within the family. Of like, this is my great great grandfather's bonsai tree that was my dad's, and it's now mine. And you know, because they live hundreds of years, some of them.
Mhm.
Take care of them.
Tony, is the upkeep why they bring them with them? Are they just like they just need that much upkeep?
Yeah, they need a lot of manicuring. I'm not very into bonsai trees. We had a college buddy who went down to Panama for like an internship in college, and he left for 6 months and asked me to take care of his bonsai tree. And that was the only time that I ever had experience caring for one. He gave me very specific instructions and was like really worried about leaving it. It was so funny. He came
Like a
back
pet.
and it wasn't up to his standards, but it was still alive. And I just, you take it. Here you go. It's back in your hands. But yeah, they're interesting. Sam, back to your question. The rest of this group already kind of heard about it, but I at one point was kind of thinking of doing this idea where I would, you know, have like an Instagram or something and feature a plant a week or a plant a day that was maybe for sale, and then have other posts, kind of like regular tips or care tips for your plants or benefits to having house plants. And then the idea was to have this kind of like plant business or tip to like help people who don't know a lot about their house plants or just don't have time to put towards them, to offer tips, have this site of sale on Instagram, but then also go into like storefronts or like the juicery or, you know, whatever it may be, and offer to bring in different cycling plants that I would have for display for sale. And if like, say this is like hanging in Healthy Being and somebody wants to buy it, they can contact me. I sell it to them and then bring in another maybe different variety plant or some other plant that's then in this space that people that first off, you know, improves the space, beautifies it, but it's also a way for me to kind of have a storefront without the brick and mortar behind it. And then I was also thinking about maybe going into like these wealthy homes or like, hey, you guys want plants for your 2 weeks in Jackson? All right, I'll supply you with your house plants. And then when you leave, you can either keep them in your house and I'll come check on them every so often and water them and take care of them for you, or I'll get them back out of there for you when you're not here for 8 months of the year.
I think that's a super cool
That's
idea.
so smart.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I don't know. So Sam, that's where I was,
Sam works with the with a lot of those properties. Sam, that's something that do a lot of the houses you're going and checking on, are they full of plants or not?
No, I don't know of any houses that have plants in them.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think there's an angle there for sure. And I was thinking, because I'm all about like passive income streams, is a lot of businesses, including luxury properties, are office. Potentially not right now because like discretionary spending has been cut, but with a lot of businesses, you could just sell them a subscription service to have those plants in their offices. And it might take you just all day, one Saturday per month to go to 10 different offices that have signed up for your subscription. And maybe they're paying you $100 a month, but you can knock out their watering and their care in 1 hour each. So that's a 10-hour day. You just made yourself $1,000 in one day, and that'll pay your rent. And so I'm thinking like that's a really cool idea to toy with, the subscription service, or what you were saying is free storage and then selling them and just giving the businesses the plants in their store for free. But I think if you sold the benefits to them and you give them a little pitch, they would be more than happy to not only sign up for a subscription, especially in an office space where productivity is a concern, but then you could eventually sell them to the employees or to people in a retail space. So I love it all.
So the subscription part from your explanation is me coming back every month and watering it and like checking in on the plants and taking care of them essentially. And then they keep it for like a 12-month subscription, or what are your thoughts there?
Yeah. Basically they're never buying the plants themselves unless at some point they wanted to do that and start caring for them themselves, which would be a great windfall for you. But I think the best angle, in my opinion, is because you just told me so many things I've never thought about or didn't know before. And most people just aren't willing to designate someone in their office to be in charge of the plants. And so if you come in and as the expert of the house plants or office plants space, and you give them all of these scientifically backed benefits, or mental health, that's a big concern now. And they're like, wow, yeah, we can easily justify $100 a month to basically rent your plants and to have you come in and do the low amount of maintenance that's needed. But because it just seems like there's a barrier to, oh, you have all this knowledge and you're the expert at it, so we'll just let you take care of it and it'll give us all the benefits. I think it's an easy sell.
Yeah, you're right. I think I got to brush up on my stats and really come in with some, like, here's productivity, here's where your mental health of your employees are going to be, here's why they're going to want to come into work every day.
Tony, as we were talking though with about like what validates you as an expert, I mean, I think that I know MJ and I doing pictures of our friends that, like, since we didn't have this huge portfolio and such, that was hard to charge at first because it's like, well, what do we have to like base this on and like ask for money? But that, like, if you just started off with, hey, oh, Brian and Kelsey want you to come over and like check on their plants or help them rearrange to make sure everything's kind of getting the best benefits possible, that like just charge them $10, right? And like all of your buddies, just charge them $10, and that will like establish a base for yourself where it won't feel 10 minutes, just heads up. It won't feel as like awkward to go to a business or a stranger and say, hey, it's going to be $100, right? Because it's making like having that confidence and taking that step to say my services are worth that. It can be awkward and kind of like off-putting, I think, at first. But like, yeah, man, you come over here and we throw you $20 on a 6-pack and be psyched. But like, you'd have a paying customer, right?
Exactly.
Getting testimonials from people.
And then the garden
that you can showcase. Like, they don't have to know that we're good friends. Like, that's always very helpful too.
Plus, I feel like you have a lot of natural like qualifications growing up around it. That's a very unique experience a lot of people will not have. And and you know, I think at a certain level too, if you value yourself at a certain level, that's what other people will value at too. If you're like, yeah, you know, I'll come by for like to a total stranger for like $10, someone's like, $10, like, you know, like it's weird how the psychology of it can be like, no, like my service is, you know, $30 for an hour or whatever. You know, I think that can help kind of reassure people who don't know you or your background of like, yeah, like that's something that I would pay for, something that's like a valid service. So
exactly. Yeah, I'm struggling a little bit going between like this idea of the house plants and then the idea of like, and Brian, I could even pull you into this if you'd be willing, but like building these cold frames or something.
Yeah.
Offering like a certain square cubage of soil, and then like a starter pack where either I like already have these vegetables started and will come plant them and help take them care of them the first subscription or whatever, the first summer, or just like, hey, here's your cold frame, the soil, and your organic seeds.
Yeah.
Good luck.
That's so funny you mentioned that, because when you were talking about the service, I was actually like, I should chat with him about seeing if you like want to pair up and like I can make, exactly what you just said. So I definitely chat.
I mean, and Tony, even that is so scalable because you can say $100 for just all the products and they put it together themselves.
Yep.
$2 for you actually taking the time to put it together, all that kind of thing. And like, oh, hey, you just want a 1 foot by 1 foot. It's this amount, and like you just do it by square footage, and you can scale those and have varying different sizes. Oh, you just want like some plants to look beautiful in your house. These are the options. Or you want to actually be able to harvest tomatoes or whatever offerings make sense. But that's super cool.
Yeah, the biggest package. Biggest package could be you come install that, put the dirt in, plant everything for them, and then even like harvest, like take care of it the whole year. And like, hey, here's your this week's harvest. Leave it outside your door, and I'll come check on it once a week or whatever, and just have these like rotating places, something along those lines. And it's creating a lot of interesting thought right now with the future outlook of the summer, and like I don't know how things are looking. Maybe this is a good time to dive into something like that.
Shortages.
I know some people are like freaking out about food shortages, and like, all right, you could even work in the whole angle of like bringing your own food security into your hands, and like,
I love it.
Who knows what? Like, I think there's a couple different ways you could work that.
I did have like another thought, Tony, for you. I was thinking about this all week because I loved where we're at with a lot of those thoughts. Is like almost the next tier up is, I was curious about Brian. Brian would know more about this. When they go in to build a house in town, do they just like scrape all the soil, I'm sure, and kind of just like destroy the land per se? Which usually there's a house already there in Jackson, but like over in Teton Valley or Victor or Driggs, they're like taking this property that's like these wild grasses and such and just stripping it, right? To go in first, like have a contract set up where they notify you, hey, we're going to go in and dig next April, and you can go in and like take those plants or move them or some kind of like, it's almost like a rescue per se.
Yeah.
Kind of a cool option where it'd be a lot like a larger scale, but the impact I would think is potentially worth it. Like, hey, you go over there with some buddies for a weekend, and part of your pitch is that you don't take the plants, you just relocate them outside of the build area. And it's like those grasses are just being replanted 50 yards away, whatever. Would be kind of a cool alternative as well.
Yeah,
that's a great idea. And I was kind of thinking about that along the same lines, Will, because I was delivering up to Solitude past the airport there, and I was like looking at some of these houses that are just like built out in the middle of nowhere, and they're like trying to plant a tree, but it's kind of like this prairie landscape. It just looks so bizarre. I'm like, man, there was no like natural landscaping or rewilding whatsoever. You just came and like plowed this place over, flat dirt, built your house, and it kind of stayed that way for what looks like 12 years now, and nothing ever happened to it. I was like, what's going on here?
Is that called rewilding?
Yeah, I don't know. That's what I called it. It's
a good phrase.
Like, do you guys have any name ideas for this business?
I actually had a whole logo thought of for you, Tony.
When are you?
I couldn't resist. I was thinking about it. I just love like the phrase like a green thumb, right? And like just a really simple like thumbprint, as if you're like at like the police station kind of thing, but having it be like just really stripped down and like just like a little green thumbprint and like Tony's green thumb or something like that. It's just like people, they get what a green thumb is. It's like has like this expert vibe as opposed to like Tony's plants and things with a little flower logo. I think it's unique enough where it kind of stands out.
Yeah, I like that.
I think it should just be a picture of Tony with like giving a thumbs up, looking like good
just
smile.
His thumb looks kind of sick.
Yeah, and your hand is like gangrene.
Gangrene.
But in a healthy way.
Oh yeah.
I will definitely think of names, but nothing comes to mind right now. But I was curious too, something that I always nerd out on. Like we're walking through some random mall or something. Like I've seen it in Apple stores a couple times, and I always drag Kelsey to go look at it. And she's like, "Yeah, we've seen this before." Those the green walls. Have you ever?
Oh.
Like I would love for our background right now to just be a forest of that. Have you ever played around with that? Because they're just like curious how that works as far as, you know, the plants. I know there's a couple different systems, and irrigating it's obviously a little bit different. And then I've also looked into just a little bit using kind of like a hydroponic system that has fish involved too. So the fish are cleaning, or no, how's it work? The plants are cleaning the water from the fish, and the fish's waste is
Providing nutrients.
in the plants.
Yeah.
So cool.
Have you like looked into that at all ever? Or?
Yeah, a little bit. So as far as the green wall, your first question, we have looked into like more just like draping, because you know there's plants that climb and then there's plants that drape. I know there are these like intricate systems that people put in with irrigation, and it's basically vertical farming that they're then doing, which there's some really cool ones out there. And I honestly think, especially in our cities, that's going to be a way of the future. Like I'm really interested in this vertical farming movement, and I think it beautifies the cities and these kind of center spaces where people are gathering so much. Anytime you got vines or anything growing up, is just so cool. Hannah, we really haven't done much like that. No, we have tried to, like, the main ones we experiment with are ones that we like try to get to climb along our walls and along the corners of our ceiling and so forth. But I think that would be really cool. I know that with hydroponics and just my background with growing up on the dairy farm, it's a lot of controversy with organic farming and hydroponics. Really, it's not. And what it boils down to is the fact that it's not natural for plants, or these types of plants that a lot of people are trying to grow hydroponically, to be growing in water. It's just not the natural source. So I know, like, with that closed system that you were talking about, with the fish providing the nutrients and then the plants utilizing those nutrients and cleaning the water, like, I don't know. I thought when I first got to town here that I was really excited on vertical harvest, and that would be a place I like wanted to go work and stuff. And I ended up doing a tour, interviewing there and everything. And then after learning about the whole process, not that I don't believe they're doing an incredible thing here in the community, but I was just turned off on their way of farming. Like, I don't think it's sustainable for the long run. And
a lot of chemicals.
It really is, like, they are all those, I don't know how many of you guys have been there, but all those little tubes that are coming into the water trays, they are feeding in nutrients and like fertilizers, pesticide, and chemicals into that. So you can't there is no certified organic hydroponics. And for me, in my upbringing and having it be a very organic, natural way of farming, I want to try to keep it as natural as possible and keep plants growing in soil. Obviously, there are certain types of aquatic plants that grow in water, and that happens in a natural process. But what we are trying to grow hydroponically today is, for the most part, not natural.
It brings an interesting conversation now, because it's like, obviously vertical harvest is doing so many other amazing things, and like certain areas don't have green space. So like, then it's like, okay, well then it is like actually a really good thing overall, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Well, Tony, I'd be interested to scheme with you, because I would love to make some system, because you're right, a lot of those hanging systems are super complicated and really expensive, but I think it'd be a cool thing to pick your guys' brains on, as far as like what kind of plants would work in it, or, you know, especially in our space, which is lower lying.
I've seen it something with, like, you know, planter boxes on the wall, and then like some sort of drip irrigation strung up and everything. Mainly when I've seen this, it's been outside, so something indoor would have to be a closed system of sorts, but I'm sure there's a way.
Yeah, that'd be fun to play around with.
That'd be a fun project.
Do it, patent it.
Tony, if you're at all interested in the subscription service, etc., I found this thing online. It says, the belief that plants are filtering and purify the air around us can be traced to a 1989 NASA study showing that indoor plants do in fact help reduce volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, in small sealed spaces such as onboard NASA missions. One famous NASA experiment found that the plants scrubbed the air of cancer-causing compounds like formaldehyde and benzene. And so I'm thinking, in a time like coronavirus, when people are worried about airborne illness and other things that can hurt them, that this might be a good selling point.
Yes, absolutely. Wow, yeah, see, there's some research I could do on the actual benefits and getting some statistics into it, and really finding a solid selling point there. Based on that information, I don't know if you guys have all seen this film yet, but Hannah and I just watched something that I would recommend to all of you called Fantastic Fungi.
Cool.
I don't know if you guys have heard of it at
It's
all.
so good.
Or the guy Paul Stamets, who is kind of
on what?
It's unbelievable.
So Paul Stamets is the guy who he started Host Defense and this whole like medicinal mushrooms.
Reishi and lion's mane and chaga are all becoming like on the forefront, I feel like, of like alternative medicine. It's just getting so popular in their ability to heal cancer, autoimmune disease, ADD, ADHD.
But where did we watch it? We had to go.
You have to
we
buy
had to
it
rent
through
it.
their website. We rented it for $5. It's worth every penny. Just everyone should watch it. Like, they talk a lot about the history of magic mushrooms too, and just like in the 60s, and how it used to be like a really like big part of research, and then like the war on drugs happened, and just like how that kind of all unwinded. But then it also talks a lot about just how mushrooms operate in nature, and it's magical. Like,
Well,
Oh,
how they
fantastic.
communicate with trees through the root systems, and it's really good cinematography too. Like, they did a really good job with the filming. It's
Fantastic fungi.
Yeah, Fantastic Fungi. Highly recommend it. Really, really cool. There's some really exciting aspects of it too that I'm wondering if maybe there are not other plants that can do this. Like they talk about mushrooms, and the mycelium is what is connected by mushrooms, and it's underneath us. It's basically they compared it to like our internet network right now, and how it's just interwoven under every inch of soil that we walk on, and it's like it's the largest organism on Earth, and it's how all these different plants communicate with each other. But the parts that I thought were really fascinating is how like they are now utilizing these certain fungi to clean up oil spills, to decompose plastic, to like do things like they're
So cool.
I think there's a lot that we can like slow down, pay attention to plants around us, to fungi, and really learn from them and utilize, this whole theory of biomimicry, like mimicking nature's design. Because really, at the end of the day, nature's got it all figured out. I think there's so much we can learn mimicking nature's design to help us as a species and to help the planet. And I really do think it's going to be the way of the future, especially with the mushrooms from what I was seeing in this documentary.
Will it make me actually enjoy eating mushrooms?
Uh,
Not magic mushrooms. I don't have a problem with those.
okay.
It might. I mean, it definitely really talks about the health benefits and like why it's creating health benefits. Basically, it goes into the cell, and it's so resilient, it'll fight off and take over and engulf like any invading pathogen. So that's how it works with cancer and stuff. Like, when you expose it to a tumor cell, it will engulf the tumor cell and basically turn it into a spore. And so then all of a sudden the tumor is replaced with a spore, which is something totally benign and safe for your body.
Huh, cool.
I don't know if you guys have all heard how we are genetically closer to mushrooms than like any other animal species or anything.
Wow.
And this film puts together this really, really persuasive argument, I guess, that we stem from fungi. And it's absolutely fascinating. And the whole stoned ape theory, how we went from like, these
Cavemen.
apes and cavemen to like all of a sudden through mushroom trips, like, finding enlightenment and starting to utilize tools and then go further and grow on the it's pretty fascinating if you guys get a chance to dabble in.
Is that the theory that cavemen were just tripping balls and eventually were like, I'm gonna make the wheel?
Yeah, and there are all these
I've never heard it before. That's awesome.
And this documentary will explain how like there are all these neurons in our brain that like sync up perfectly with something in these psychedelic mushrooms. And it's like they go through this like, is it here on earth as like something we're meant to experiment with, or is it like something that's the forbidden fruit, you know? Like
Yeah.
and it's I don't know.
Whoa.
Interesting. You guys you would all love it. It's really
Cool.
good. Yeah.
Kelsey,
Tony,
who?
I have a thought for you. Another thing that I think could, especially if you have some time on your hands this summer, like benefit you if you did, is that a diffuser I see? If you did like 20-minute like free consultations, and then I feel like you're like outgoing enough, and I honestly feel like you don't seem like you're like a newbie to any of these things. Like I don't know any of this stuff. But if you did like a free like 20-minute consultation and then like went in someone's home and you're like, yeah, that plant needs to be moved around here and there and whatever else, and then you could like pepper in things like, oh, this plant, I have this plant that would actually work really well here, like blah blah blah, and then like sell them some plants potentially, or be like,
Exactly.
yeah, this one's not really going to work in your home for this reason. I can take it and nurse it back to health, or I can
Swap it
whatever,
out.
right? Or you could sell like the subscription based idea, or like an hourly, like I can replant these pots for you, but after the 20 minutes, it's going to be however much per hour. And then, I don't know, I feel like
Yeah.
you could get a lot out of just being like maybe you would just go in for 20 minutes and just suggest a couple things and then like get the fuck out of there. But could
Kelsey,
potentially.
I was thinking of you and Gear Grab because he kind of has the same challenge of, does he buy his fleet up front, or does he like go around to all his friends and say, hey, MJ Will, this one plant, like it's not doing super hot. I think I can nurse it back to life, and like I take it off your hands. And be like, for sure, yeah, go grab that one. That's great. But or maybe we would.
I trust you, Tony.
Yeah.
You could call the little consultation the Tony tease. Just tease them a little bit of what you got.
I'll have to say about that one.
I feel like if you did, I mean, between like spider plants that, you could get like the, whatever they're called, the little bud off of, between like that and just start like accumulating more plants. But I also feel like if you were going to people's homes, like the amount, I mean, we have an orchid and I feel like those always die. And if you were like, well, you need to be doing this, this, and this. And if it was like a lot of maintenance, then there might just be some people that are like, and would probably be fine with just getting rid of it potentially.
Yeah, that's true.
I feel
Yeah,
like
you can almost buy it off them, right? You could say, hey, I'll buy that one off you for $20, then you go ahead and sell it later for 50. I don't know. Plants
Yeah.
cost.
Yeah, and then the other idea was like some sort of plant swap sort of thing. So having like a group of friends like this, like, hey, you got a cool mature plant that you want to like share a little bit, bring the whole thing to, like you were saying, May Park or something. We'll meet at 5, and then we can like propagate and like swap and do certain things like that.
Come alone, don't bring the cops.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great idea. And it's kind of like what you were saying, Brian, like fake it till you make it sort of thing. I ended up just like with guiding people through Yellowstone and Grand Teton all the time. Like one of the questions that I got asked all the time were about wildflowers.
Mm-hmm.
And like, there's so many of them. I was just like, shit, I have no idea what this is. And I started taking pictures of them. And then Hannah recommended this app that was like a $20 app that you can then like ID through the picture what it is, and it pulls up all this stuff. So like I've started utilizing it. I was like, oh, I wonder if this works on like these exotic houseplants, and lo and behold, it does. And it pulls up like all this information, the type of light it likes, like how much water it should get, where it should be, and and it was like, whoa, this is awesome. So like just utilizing something as simple as that for some like, oh, this is a plant I've never run into before. I don't know. Like you can find some basic information really quickly, and like I don't know, being intuitive about it too goes a long ways.
I mean, I also feel like majority of people don't know houseplants super well, and if you were someone who knew how to work them really well, then you probably wouldn't want your services anyway. So I feel like to most people, you're going to sound like an expert because I wouldn't know half the stuff that you mentioned.
That's
Tony,
right.
if you went into a house where they were asking you about a certain plant and you're like, in your head, you're like, I've never seen that plant before. You'd be like, Yeah, I think we have some of that. Let me look at my inventory to see it. Like, taking a picture of it and reading up on it.
It's one of those things I feel like you just learn as you go, kind of.
Yeah.
Probably pretty quickly too.
Brian,
Like a
you're a real scam artist.
No. I just fake it till I make it, Skipper.
Skipper.
Tony, you gotta. I'm gonna send you this article, but yeah, I just got the juices flowing, and this article is about research. What is it? It's a study from the CDC that says higher humidity lowers flu transmission. So above 40% humidity, it's basically flu cannot survive. So they said to stimulate flu transmission in a healthcare setting, the researchers used coughing and breathing mannequins that were placed about 6 feet apart. Flu virus particles released during a cough and devices throughout the room and near each other. Breathing mannequins' mouth captured the particles. The particles were then collected and tested for their ability to infect human cells. At humidity levels of 23%, 70 to 77% of the flu virus particles were still able to cause an infection an hour after the coughing simulation. But when humidity levels were raised to just 43%, just 14% of the virus particles had the ability to infect. Most of the flu particles became inactive 15 minutes after they were released into the humid air. The virus just falls apart at high humidity levels, said study researcher John Nody of the CDC's National Institute. High humidity was just as detrimental to the flu particles to small flu particles as large ones. That's important because small flu particles tend to hang in the air for a longer time, while large particles fall to the ground. So this is like...
So 6 feet apart is not far enough.
This is next level stuff, though. I mean, like, we got to run with this now, because when they're talking about, all this talk about warmer weather helping like kill it, it's not because it's just warmer, it's because it's more humid in the summer months. And man, this could be like pretty groundbreaking stuff with people paranoid about airborne flu virus, as well as they're going to take their health a lot more seriously from now on. So I mean, this has unlimited potential with this kind of data already done by the CDC.
All right, we're creating indoor jungles.
I also just sent that article just the last time that we were on a call.
Awesome.
I couldn't remember where it was from. I thought it was the New York Times, but it was CNN about.
It was in the Times too. I actually,
Was it?
yeah, I looked it up and actually saw that exact article you were talking about and read it. Yeah, that was fascinating. Yeah, so applicable. Wow, Sam, that's huge.
Yeah, I'd love to collaborate on after people get back to their offices, starting a little business, because I think it could be so scalable, so passive.
We got to figure out how many plants gets you to that 40-something% humidity, and what type of plants it would take.
Wait. Are you guys starting a business? And I need to find a spot for this. Am I like the guy who shows up at like midnight, waters all the plants by myself? Brian's building these like elaborate, beautiful contraptions. Sam's salesman of the year. What the heck?
Oh, you're the visionary, I feel like.
You are. This all came about you, Will.
Have you guys ever watched Silicon Valley?
No, I didn't know of it, but yeah.
There's a guy, he calls it his incubator, and he has a house that all these people live in and brainstorm ideas. And you are a very different personality, because this guy's just kind of like a waste of space.
Now you need to watch
and
it.
Just like, well, it's my incubator, so I deserve, a big cut of it. So
yeah, there you go.
Incubator.
He like takes ownership on everything.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
What do you guys think about silicone coular?
Have we?
Like, what do you think about it? Do you know anything about it? Like, do you think it's beneficial? Do you know anyone who's gone through it? Have you considered going through it?
For sure. I got yes to almost all of those. I have not gone through it. Bubba has. Bubba was in the very first class that did the startup intensive. And Mike Dowda, who works at Giver, his wife Liza is runs it.
Oh, I know Liza.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so I don't know like their offerings thoroughly, but I know that like people who go through it in general say it's just an awesome push and accountability efforts that like you have deadlines, right? Like they make it intense and pretty rigorous. I've thought about it for Full Table, and I haven't really researched exactly like which of their courses or offerings would make the most sense. But I mean, someone like Tony that like doing pitch day, right? They have like investors there. They have everybody like you can go there as a community. It's a really cool chance to get an idea or just get your name out there further.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know there's something. Oh, sorry, Will.
No, go ahead.
There's something else that's not like startup intensive, and obviously they're not doing it right now, but I think it's on a regular basis, weekly or monthly.
Yeah.
Evening, I forget what it's called.
Oh, they're doing it online actually.
But
yeah,
you-
the mentor thing, right?
Well, I'm not sure. Maybe it's the same thing. The one that
just,
I'm
like,
thinking of,
connect.
it's just like a social gathering you go to, and it's really just kind of about networking and talking to people and pitching your idea. And
Are you talking about like the chamber mixers or no?
no,
They're
it's
kind of like
it's
that.
like the chamber mixer, but it's like entrepreneurial specific.
Okay.
And
Yeah, I know what you're thinking of. I'm blanking out on the name. Those
Champ
interesting
meetings.
to me. I think Sam Hack would have more thoughts on the benefits of like that, just kind of more general networking. But like where Tony's at, I feel like he's got like this awesome baseline of an idea, and like how do you make it tangible? Like how do you like find out your budget, find out like how many employees you need, all those things that like take a lot of effort to, or you kind of just need to think about those eventually. They push you to do so. And that's like kind of why I've considered it with Full Table is this idea is so like well thought out, but that next step of, okay, like how do you put it into action can be challenging. I mean, Kelsey, I'm sure you thought about it for Gear Grab as well, right?
Yeah. You do have to pay for it. It's like $5,000, or you can
really?
or they'll do scholarships to make it, I think, 3,000. It's also during the day. I want to say it's like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday or something.
Yeah, that was one of my hesitations.
Yeah.
Like a full-on commitment that like it's not like a night course.
We just put up a link to the other just kind of gathering thing.
Cool.
Yeah, I see it.
And they're doing it online, obviously, this time around. But there is one coming up. I think the next like silicone cooler is, I want to say actually this month. It starts this month. It was like the daytime thing that really, I can't do that.
Yeah. As far as
they do have like a 5-week. They have a 5-week option. I think that they recently introduced as opposed to like the 10-week intensive. Which I'm curious about what that's like. I mean, honestly, what MJ has been pushing me to do, which is I think completely accurate, is to do like my own life coaching course and kind of like go through that whole structure on somebody else, or like even a community gathering, like find out some kind of course or someone who's done it before that like now that we're quarantined, this is the best time ever really to do those digital classes and work through it. So Tony, you could go on and like almost get your master's in hydroponics.
Tony's peeing right now, but
Doing his own hydroponics.
Right, but I mean, in general, though, like to go through those steps, that now is an awesome time.
Yeah.
I think, Tony, if you're able to figure out what those kind of baseline or like immediate next steps are, that will be huge for you. Because then then things are moving and the next step will be easier. But that, yeah, like if you can get one of your buddies to send you a plant or to slowly start buying up some plants, that'd be super cool.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I have looked into silicone couloir a little bit. Like when we first moved to Jackson, I remember, I think it was you or some friends or something that mentioned it. And I remember the cost being like very prohibitive, like, whoa. But the fact that you are then like pitching in front of these investors in a place like Jackson Hole where people have money to throw around, I think is like, I know a lot of the people who have gone through silicone couloir say the investment pays off very quickly. So yeah, it's an interesting thought, and it's cool that a community of 10,000 people, if that's really what we still are, has something like that. That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tony, if you had like 10 plants, and you said I can commit like an hour or however long it takes to take care of 10 plants once a week on a Saturday or something, I guarantee I can find someone or a business or even like an apartment building lobby, like those new Hidden Hollow apartments over there have this great big lobby with no greenery in there whatsoever. A health and safety pitch is always so easy. Like you can pass any law if it has to do with health and safety. You can sell anything if it has to do with health and safety. And in this time, I think people would snatch that kind of idea right away. So yeah.
I mean, you just named like some pretty ideal spots that you like almost don't even need to interact with that many people. If you're like, hey, I come into a hotel, which is a new spot, and you fill the hotel with plants, right? That's 100 rooms or whatever it is. So you go to the inns, you go to the Marriott, all those places, and you do that for them. Like that's already a huge clientele. And then you do the private people who come into Shooting Star for 2 weeks a year, and you just kind of spruce it up so they arrive, they feel like they have house plants, they don't need to water them, they don't need to do anything with them, and they leave and they know that they're going to be taken care of, like swapped out to literally the house next door. Like you have that whole scheduling down. Have a rotating kind of infinite amount of customers. It's pretty incredible. The people that like us saying, hey Tony, come over and check out our plans would almost not even be worth your time.
Yeah, the thing I'm comparing it to, the model is like Jackson Hole Baby Gear. We deal with them a lot.
Yeah.
Because families will come in with these little kids and want high chairs and toys and things like that. And Jackson Hole Baby Gear will go to a house in Shooting Star and rent them a high chair for $50 a day and just crush it. And all they had to do was front the money up, to buy the materials. And then they're just making it back 10-fold, 20-fold with all the costs of rentals. So I'm thinking you don't actually sell the plants. You just have that rental rearranging service. And just build your arsenal for now, because I think sky's the limit once people realize how great it would be.
Yeah, I've actually seen that quite a bit when I'm delivering groceries, and you see like their nice little setup with their high chair and some toys, like all the little things. It's like, what? How did I genius idea?
And that can kind of, I think you probably mentioned this, but that could piggyback on your Instagram sale thing too. Like all those lobbies and places that you have plants, that's kind of your storage for your inventory. And then something comes up for sale and someone buys it, then you just swap it out.
Yeah, exactly. So the thing I got to figure out with that is like the durability of these plants, because they don't like continuously outside into a new house, new environment, back into a car, back into this place.
Yeah.
That would be something that would be tough. So I think really hammering down on the health and the benefit side of having these like real live plants in your space, because otherwise it's like, well, we could just get some cheap fake plants and put them in there and it'll beautify the space a little bit. But if you really hammer down those health points and benefits and like get a solid argument there, I think that's a huge part of it.
I think you're right that having a business sign on for 6 months where you're taking care of a plant, moving it once or twice a year, is better for the plant and the people than swapping out at the houses on a more regular basis. for the time being. And then you could do a lot of research like, oh, I can just get a bunch of these big cacti and move those around and they're super resilient, or like you figure out what works for those. But at like a starting point, yeah, that kind of more sustained time period makes a lot of sense. It's cool.
Ooh, this is interesting stuff here.
Yeah, Tony, when you first like opened up about plants and taking care of them, I was like, yeah, I'm probably not going to get a lot out of this. But then like now I'm absolutely like intrigued and like super stoked about what you can do with your interest and passion. Like not only am I going to go upstairs right now and bring a plant down to my room for the immediate damn, the business of plants just got a lot more interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. There's a lot to it. And I think the more you start to open yourself up to it and just like play with them and water them and like see how vulnerable they are to different like slight changes in temperature and sun, and it's I don't know. I get a kick out of it. I have a lot of fun.
So where do
we
you
have
get plants?
10 minutes left. We should call it after this.
Sounds good. I was curious where you get plants for yourself, or like where would you source plants from?
My whole fleet are babies from my mom's collection, as well as plants that Hannah has brought into the relationship from who knows where, her family, or that she's gotten as gifts along the way. And then I am constantly scouring the Jackson Hole online garage sale for plants around here, because people, it's like, they don't realize the worth of them. And they're like, hey, I've got a few plants for free. Here you go. And I think I told you guys, like the senior center across the way from us here put up this posting the other day that they had like these huge plants that were like on these like wheels that they were moving from window to window. And they were just giving them away for free because they needed to set up a stage in there for some concert and they were in the way. And I'm like, these, if you were to go on to like, in some city, like say you were in Portland and you went to like a plant place to buy these, it'd probably be like a $300 plant.
Wow.
Jeez.
Yeah. So they had some really crazy mature ones. So I watched that. A lot of times people are giving away fake plants, so you got to be careful of that, like asking if they're really but I honestly think that like these little plant swaps, or just being over at a friend's house and being like, wow, that's a really cool plant, and I noticed it's propagating a new shoot, or can I take a little, cutting off of it, or can I grab that and put it in something at home and water. And as long as you change that water once a week and just like put it in a little glass of water in your window for like 2 weeks, it'll get these gnarly roots and you can plant it in soil and off she goes.
Cool.
It's awesome.
But yeah, I would
source them from would be the hard thing though. We'd have to figure that out.
Yeah, what's that place down by the butcher, by that gym? No.
Oh, that's like, yeah, the floral shop.
Yeah,
that's your competition.
That's the biggest plant provider in Jackson, followed by Twigs.
They are so expensive though. Have you ever been there?
I've never been in there. I've always wanted to though.
I went in to get Kelsey like a bouquet of flowers for something. I walked in, looked down, was like, well, I guess I'm going, because you can't afford anything in there.
Something like this would probably be like $35.
35 to like 45.
And then,
I mean, honestly, Tony, it seemed to me that like people are going down to Denver or Idaho Falls so often that like whenever someone's driving down there, you just like have them ping you and say, hey, I'll Venmo you, just grab a plant for me. Like, I'm hoping for this. If you can find it, it'd be awesome. Like, we go down a couple times a year, and to bring back like 3 or 4 plants or whatever you needed, that's like an easy thing to be able to do. And suddenly you have like a stock that's coming up from a more affordable place.
Yeah, we were talking about on the drive back to Wyoming this past fall. I was just trying to talk about like different passions and like, what could I do? And we had this idea, and I was like about ready to be like, all right, we started buying all these different planters and like these different pots, and we were like, all right, we're going to stock up, get some soil. And then we were like, we're going to just go with it. And we had come with all these cuttings from my mom's house after like raiding all her plants. And we were like trying to keep them warm enough on the drive out here. And we camped one night in the Black Hills. And that night, the like jar of water I had all these things in froze solid. Like some of them survived, but most of them just did not do too well. And then I was like, how are we going to get plants in Jackson in the wintertime?
Yeah.
It's feasible. So it was like, all right, this has to pause until the spring. And then it was like, yeah, still going to Idaho Falls and doing like van loads and just doing like a big buy and bringing them back. And then,
Yeah, your seasonal cycle will be pretty cool to figure out.
yeah.
Well, I got a 6x12 cargo trailer we could hook up to my truck and go to a Idaho Falls run.
Oh, we got big boys.
Yeah.
You got the whole business right here.
Like we're gonna have to
Yeah.
like, our kitchen or bedroom or something.
Yeah.
Just move the rest of our furniture into one room.
You built a greenhouse.
You had that little side room. You hook up some of those lights Hannah was talking about, and
There we go.
the greenhouse over there.
There we
Now
go.
we're talking about a different kind of business.
Yeah.
More lucrative, maybe.
Yeah. Well, thanks for all this education. This has been really sweit.
Yeah,
That was awesome.
absolutely.
Thank you, Tony. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks
That
for
was
listening
great.
to me blab on plants.
We'll have to continue this conversation. I think the ideas are just starting to flow. It's awesome.
No,
Yeah.
I really appreciate you guys' feedback and your insights there, because it's funny how you can just like look at an idea and think about it all day, and then somebody says something and you're like, how did I not think about that? You know, and it's just like
Yeah.
all these different perspectives means a lot. So thank you guys.
And I think it's going to be super cool in the future too, seeing how that can morph into what Hannah's doing, like you guys have spoken about in past full tables. I mean, they're so compatible. It's going to be super cool to see that grow and transform.
Just do it.
Yeah.
Thanks, MJ.
Well, hey everybody, have an awesome rest of your evening, and we'll talk to you here soon.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
You guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Weather.
Sounds good.
Much love
Peace
to you
out.
all. Stay safe.
Yes.